Few artists have received such universal acclaim as Prince. Even so, the legendary diva managed to leave a bad taste in some mouths. And it turns out at least a handful of those were other A-listers. Singer-songwriter Sinead O'Connor became a superstar in 1990 when her breakup ballad Nothing Compares to You hit #1 on the US pop chart. Notably, O'Connor's hit was actually a cover of a song Prince wrote in 1985 for The Family, a band that he'd signed to his Vanity record label. A few months after the song's success, O'Connor accepted an invite to visit Prince at his home outside of Los Angeles. After silently staring her down in his kitchen for a few minutes, O'Connor recalled in her memoir, Rememberings, that Prince suddenly chastised her for using curse words in interviews. In response, O'Connor stated, "I don't work for you," I tell him. "If you don't like it, you can go f*** yourself." Her response irritated Prince, who disappeared elsewhere into the house and re-emerged later to bully a servant and start a pillow fight with O'Connor. And while pillow fights are generally playful, O'Connor realized quickly that this was an assault. She reflected, "On the first thump I get, I realize he's got something in the pillow, stuffed down the end, designed to hurt. He ain't playing at all." O'Connor then demanded to be driven home. Speaking to the New York Times about the altercation, she later reflected, "You've got to be crazy to be a musician, but there's a difference between being crazy and being a violent abuser of women."
Did you ever see or hear from him again?
No, I didn't.
Prince's first major live performing experience came as the opening act for Rick James on his early 1980 club tour. Selected as a hot up-and-coming act to counter the slumping James, Prince proved to be a bigger draw, earning bigger responses from crowds than the headliner did. James and Prince quickly grew to resent one another, as musician Bootsy Collins noted in the documentary The Sound and Fury of Rick James.
They would pull plugs on each other, and get ready to go to blows.
However, their conflict wasn't just the result of this performance-induced rivalry. According to R&B star Tina Marie, James swiped Prince's synthesizers and used the instruments and their program sequences on the 1981 album Street Songs, then returned them with a thank you note. Prince then lured away Denise Matthews, a romantic interest of James's, for his girl group Vanity 6. James also went off on Prince to Rolling Stone, saying, "I can't believe people are gullible enough to buy Prince's Jive records. He's a mentally disturbed young man. He's out to lunch. You can't take his music seriously." In 1983, James tore into Prince once more, this time focusing on his persona and racial identity, telling Blues and Soul, "He doesn't want to be black. My job is to keep reality over this little science fiction creep. And if he doesn't like what I'm saying, he can kiss my ass." As the founder and sole permanent member of Nine Inch Nails, industrial rock musician Trent Reznor is a lot like Prince. Both could play a lot of different instruments, and they executed a clear, singular vision of their work in the recording studio. Reznor was once a huge fan of Prince. Sadly, the pair met in the early 1990s, when Prince was going by an unpronounceable symbol rather than his artist name. Reznor spoke about the meeting with Select magazine, saying, "I was in this studio and I heard Prince was coming in. There was a time when I thought he was awesome, but what a creep." In advance of the visit, Reznor received a rundown of stipulations for when interacting with the star. The Hurt singer recalled, "You were never to say the word Prince. You had to write down that symbol. You were never to look at him or talk to him unless he approached you first." When Prince finally appeared, he did so in a pink suit and high-heeled shoes, while sucking on a lollipop and reeking of perfume. Prince wanted Reznor and his associates to remix a song for him, but when the time came for the two musicians to actually meet, Prince just walked past Reznor without any acknowledgement. Multiple pop stars in the 1980s pushed the envelope and moved the general culture forward by blurring traditional gender norms in their clothing choices and public presentation. Two of the most notable figures in this androgyny movement were Prince and Boy George, the lead singer of the UK new wave band Culture Club. While to the public, it may have seemed like the two stars shared a similar visual flair and fashion thesis, Boy George certainly didn't see it. He thought of himself as very fashionable, and Prince as grotesquely unattractive, not to mention too short and overly furry. Boy George reportedly once called him a dwarf who's been dipped in a bucket of pubic hair. The nastiness could be tied to an off-putting face-to-face meeting with Prince that Boy George had to endure, which the Culture Club singer recounted on the Jonathan Ross show. He recalled, "I loved Prince. I met Prince and he didn't speak for 15 minutes. And it was still the most iconic conversation I've ever had. I met him in Paris and he wanted to meet me. Then when I sat down, he didn't say a word. He just stared at me, and I wanted the floor to swallow me.
Not a single word was said for 10 minutes.
Richard Blackwell was first a fashion designer specializing in strange, edgy looks, but he gained a lot of attention and notoriety under the guise of Mr. Blackwell, a fashion critic who didn't much care for weird clothing worn by other famous people. Each year, from 1960 until shortly before his death in 2008, he'd release a heavily distributed worst dressed list, with which he'd colorfully eviscerate celebrities he found to be sartorially challenged. In January 1985, at the peak of Prince's Purple Rain era fame, the pop singer earned the public ire of Mr. Blackwell with a spot on the Worst Dressed Women of the Year list. Yes, Prince was a man, but he favored such fashion-forward and non-traditional gender-skewing outfits that Mr. Blackwell included him on the women's list as a snide joke. Prince came in 10th place, in a tie with the drag-influenced heavy metal singer Dee Snider of Twisted Sister. At any rate, Mr. Blackwell savagely criticized Prince's fashion choices in the list, likening the diminutive star to, quote, a toothpick wrapped in a purple doily. Rising to prominence in the post-punk era, Jah Wobble was among the most in-demand British musicians from the late 70s until the mid-1990s. He brought his bass guitar and funk and reggae-influenced sound to side projects recorded by members of Can and U2, while also playing on influential and popular albums by Primal Scream and Johnny Rotten's Public Image Limited. Musical superstar Prince counted himself among Wobble's fans, but the feeling was decidedly not mutual. While they played a gig together in 1983, the two musicians met backstage at another Wobble show. As Natasha Atlas, a musician who witnessed the altercation, told music journalist Percy Howard, Prince approached Wobble and told him that he really enjoyed his bass guitar stylings. Wobble's reaction was none too kind. Atlas recalled, Wobble just looked at Dave and said, "Get this little out of here now." Wobble doesn't care, even though Prince was famous. He thought Prince was a pretentious ass. R&B singer and hip-hop figure Lil Mo broke out in the late 90s with the assistance of her mentor, Missy Elliott, and she's since collaborated with the likes of Jay-Z, Blackstreet, Keith Sweat, Next, and Ja Rule. In advance of her first album in 3 years, Lil Mo made the rounds of the 2014 Essence Music Festival at the Superdome in New Orleans. As a musician of some stature, Lil Mo possessed a VIP pass, but during the celebration, she was prevented from using a backstage bathroom. Instead, the singer was physically stopped from using the facilities by members of the New Orleans Police Department, who were acting on orders to hold back anyone and everyone because the festival's headliner, Prince, was moving through the area. Lil Mo promptly reacted to the situation with some quips on Instagram, writing, "I don't want to see him. I had to pee. This industry is crazy." Shortly thereafter, she added another post critiquing Prince for failing to reach some high notes during his set. Prince saw Lil Mo's Instagram posts about him and replied in kind on X, then known as Twitter, writing, "I hope she know, none of her clothes match." Prince's main rival in 1980s musical dominance was Michael Jackson, and their relationship was fueled by competitive bitterness. Prince enjoyed a commercial breakthrough in 1982, when his 1999 record sold more copies than any of his other albums up to that point. A month later, Jackson unleashed Thriller, which eventually became the best-selling album in history. When Lionel Richie organized the 1985 session to record the charity single We Are the World, he wanted all the biggest stars to participate. Jackson co-wrote the song, while Prince said he might show up, but ultimately didn't. Later that year, Prince won an Academy Award for the music from Purple Rain, which left Jackson, who wanted to be a movie star, privately angry. Nevertheless, Jackson reached out to Prince to duet in the title track from his 1987 album Bad. Prince refused because he didn't like the supposed sexual undertones of some of the lyrics. When they'd run into each other in the late 80s, Prince derisively called Jackson Camille, and once tried to get his limo driver to run him down. In 2006, Jackson went to a Prince concert in hopes of mending their feud. Prince saw Jackson sitting near the stage, went up to his seat, and aggressively slapped his bass guitar inches from his head, leaving Jackson perturbed. As will.i.am, who was also on the bill that night, told Graham Norton, Jackson debriefed with the rapper about the excursion the following day.
Prince, he's always been a meanie.
The Rolling Stones booked Prince to be one of its opening acts during their 1981 US tour to promote the album Tattoo You. On the first concert of the tour, 94,000 people packed Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum to see the rock legends. Rock-loving fans didn't like Prince's funky R&B, and early in his set, they began throwing things like chicken and drink containers at the singer and his band. After throwing objects, they began shouting crude insults of a racial and anti-LGBTQ nature at the performer. In response to which, Prince and his musicians ended their show after 4 songs and quit the tour. Although Rolling Stones singer Mick Jagger helped convince him to return for another show, fans were once again rude to Prince, and once more, he walked away from the tour. In his 2010 memoir Life, Stones guitarist Keith Richards very briefly reflected on the time he spent near Prince and offered his thoughts on the diva's early career music. He didn't like what he heard, either then or after. Richards rejected and derided Prince, calling him overrated before referring to him as a slur for little people. While there was evidently bad blood between the guitarists, it is worth noting that it seems to have dissipated over time. Between the time Richards published his book and Prince's death in 2016, Richards had seemingly changed his mind. On X, the Rolling Stones said of his fellow rock star, "A unique talent, a true original. So sad, so sudden, and, I will add, a great guitar player. We are all going to miss him." In 2005, NBA All-Star Carlos Boozer bought an 18,000 square foot Los Angeles estate from movie producer Ted Fields. Because he was playing for the Utah Jazz at the time, Boozer couldn't live in the mansion full-time, and to earn back some of the money he dropped, he agreed to rent it at a rate of $95,000 per month to a tenant who asked to remain anonymous. Sometime later, Boozer learned that the mysterious stranger living in his home was Prince, something he would have instantly assumed when he paid a visit to his house and discovered that the musician had extensively renovated the place without permission from his landlord. Among other changes, Prince replaced the carpets with purple ones, converted a bedroom into a private hair salon, and turned a weight room into a dance studio. In response, Boozer threatened to sue, but when Prince received the paperwork, he jumped into action to avoid the costly legal proceedings.
Do you really want to sue Prince? Nobody really wants to sue Prince.
He sent the basketball player $500,000 as a good faith payment, swearing he'd restore the rental home to its original state by the time he moved out. Prince did just that, and the lawsuit was dropped. Admittedly, this experience probably wasn't the biggest obstacle for Boozer to overcome emotionally, but even the mere possibility of getting on the wrong side of a music legend like Prince was surely a situation the basketball star would have liked to avoid.